The first yours for me. Thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. I'm delighted to see that you're here and there's people on Zoom. Please feel free to stop me anytime. And I'm Ramiro Montealegre, and I'm going to be presenting a topic that is very interesting with all these digital platforms, right? But we're going to be talking about that it's an exercise of balancing, defining, and renewing it. And this is a work that we did with Kishan Iyengar. He is also at the Lead School of Business, and it was published in Business Horizons last year. So let me give you a little bit of the idea about the agenda for this afternoon. Okay, if this works. What is it? That's okay. So I'm going to introduce why the importance of the topic, but I want to spend especially more time talking about the research approach that we follow that I hope is useful. And we use especially this company Remax, which is the #1 seller of housing, and how they develop the digital platform. And then some implications for research and conclusion. If everybody, feel free, the people who are in Zoom, to ask questions. Stop me anytime. And the main thing is that it's useful for you guys. So as we know, it doesn't matter through the history of civilization, communicating information has been critical in doing our job, right? So for example, when we were hunters and gatherers in that type of society, it was very important to understand what is the role of each one in cutting the animal, and the same thing in the agricultural society. How do you plan for the food that is going to be generated in the different fields? And in industrial society, it will be more complex, trying to identify what is that we want and need to make our life easier. And of course, we are now in the information society that we organize to better deal with uncertainty and complexity that we have. But one thing that is fascinating to think about is that, especially in the first three societies, the infrastructure that enabled that information to communicate was very fixed, right? Very rigid. So where is your cave was fundamental. Where is the fields where you're going to be growing the plants? Critical. Same thing in the industrial time, right? There was a lot of time spent in where do we place the factory, where do we have the highways, where do we put the train line, because once it's fixed, very different. That's different in society 4.0, right? Because the infrastructure is based on digital technology that keeps changing all the time, right? In fact, it's evolving as we speak, right? So until now, we have gone through at least these 3 different phases of technology, which is what basically based on the type of technology ecosystem that exists. In phase 1, it was the big computers, mainframe computers, languages like Fortran, COBOL. The whole idea was to make it more efficient, the use of expensive technology resources. Then, of course, it came the local area networks and PCs and laptops. So it became a lot easier for us to be providing a computer per person to be more effective in the work in the organization. So does that make sense so far? Right? And then, phase 3, which is where most companies are now, which is when the internet became available, in corporate packages like SAP, Enterprise Resource Planning, and Customer Relationship Management. And that's what many companies are in, right? To be more strategic by using these type of technologies to support. Now, of course, we see a new set of technologies that are coming our way, right? And so these are the key words that I'm sure that all of you have heard, right? Cloud computing, business analytics, Internet of Things, blockchain, right? And what is fascinating to think about these type of technologies is, each one is different, but they have something in common, which is they are allowing us to collect huge amount of data, volume, from different sources. They can be structured, unstructured, dynamic, and what is fascinating to think about this is that it's enabling us, again, to organize in different ways, like a network organization. So, for example, Marriott and Hilton, the hotel chains, they grew up in these type of technologies, right? And they are trying to optimize a hotel by having restaurant and having all the services that people can provide. Airbnb was born in this type of environment, right? The idea of enabling people around the world to have an extra room, an extra couch, an extra apartment, and connect with other individuals that are visiting that city, right? And you can imagine that have a huge implication in how you manage the infrastructure because, in the case of Hilton and Marriott, they have to have employees, the cleaning, the restaurant, everything. Here is allowing, Airbnb is allowing a level of complexity and networking people who own the apartments or who have the extra room. And basically what each individual is in charge of making sure that I have a good apartment. I do my own marketing. I do, to have the 5 stars and people want to visit my apartment. So you decentralize that opportunity. And that's what they have become a fascinating opportunity, which is a digital platform that integrates these different entrepreneurs to be able to work as a company with this level of growth. Does that make sense? So you can see that digital platforms have become a very important way of doing business today, right? And when you see the majority of companies, Netflix and Google, are platforms. So it can call a lot of attention in how can we create this. And of course, a platform is Airbnb, right? Is having user A will be owners of apartments, and user B is people visiting that city. And through data, you're able to connect. The platform, of course, has to have the hardware, the software, the services, but also the rules. So you understand that nobody is going to go to your house and steal the artwork in your house, or they're going to destroy your house, right? So it's very important to understand how to create this trust that is going to be there, right? So that's what a business platform is. And now there's a lot of conversations about developing a platform. However, having said that, so a platform is that's the definition, right? It's an ecosystem that is formed of people, data, processes, things that are connected that goes beyond the scope of one single system. This is very different than a system like SAP, right? That you have to have all the functionality from the beginning. This is a plug and play of different functions. And it sounds beautiful, but how do you evolve this? It's difficult, right? Because you don't want it to be too rigid, either that you cannot, so it has to be open to allow new players to come in, new services to be provided. It needs to be interconnected. It had to be dynamic. It had to be shaped by the installed base. So, as there's more people, I don't know if you have seen Airbnb, they began by providing apartments, but now they are providing big, castles, and now they are also using attractions that are close to that home, right? So it is adding different submodules to do this. So as this sounds interesting, but you have to understand that now when you create a platform, it's nice because it's coming from zero. What's going to happen with these platforms in 4 years, in 5 years? Are they going to become rigid? Right? So you have to keep evolving. It's an ongoing dynamic process that you are interweaving social and technical arrangements. How do you organize a platform that is not as rigid as a highway? That once you put it there, you cannot move it. Right? This has to be dynamic. The needs of Airbnb 5 years from now is different than today, right? So that's, and of course, you can imagine that that's going to create tensions. What type of tensions? And tensions are stress, anxieties, discomforts, and contradictions are bipolars. That if you do more of this, there have to be a balance, right? So these are examples of contradictions. We want our digital infrastructure to be stable, right? But at the same time, you want it to be flexible. Because if there is changes, so how do you develop a technology system that is stable but flexible at the same time? That's a tension, right? A system that is standard, so everybody understands standardization, but at the same time, if there is a new feature, you want it to be non-standard. You want it to be best practices, but at the same time, to be diverse and malleable to new practices. You have to be able to control, but at the same time, you want that to provide autonomy to different groups. You can imagine that, for example, Airbnb want to be tight control, but there's going to be our Airbnb in France, for example, that they want to do things in different ways, or in Colombia. So you want also that in Colombia, they provide different things, right? You can imagine, for example, one of the problems with technology in the past, like SAP, is that it's too rigid, right? If there is something that is related to the tax system in Colombia, then, sorry, but, this German software doesn't take into account different. Does that make sense so far? So, do you see then the importance of doing this research? Because, until now, everybody's talking about you should move into a digital platform. But you have to be careful how you organize it so it doesn't become rigid in the future. Right? So we argue, and that's the central portion of our paper, is that in thinking about how to evolve a digital platform, you have to have the capability to identify contradictions and a strategy to resolve them from the beginning. You have to be very aware of that, so you don't create. And by resolving these tensions, manage to contribute to the ability to make choices, respond to, move forward, and this is what is called organizational ambidexterity, right? That comes from the idea of ambidextrous, that I can use my left hand and my right hand in the same way, right? And that's the idea, is how are you able to be ambidextrous in exploiting the infrastructure at the same time that you are thinking about exploring new opportunities. Okay? And so that's the idea of refining and renewal. Refining is about exploiting, creating routines. Renewal is about exploration. It's new activities, it's new research, it's new opportunities that exist. And basically, because what happens is, if you only exploit a technology, it results in core rigidities, right? It becomes too rigid, and then it's not malleable anymore. But on the other hand, if you do too much exploration, then it becomes endless cycle. It's a system that, it's always in beta. Beta 1, beta 2, but people don't trust the system because it's always all the time changing. So that's also bad, right? If you cannot believe that this platform will be stable, it is really hard. You have to be changing all the time. Right? Any comments so far? Any questions? Okay. So, and this is the type of research that exists today. It's in what is called organizational ambidextrity, and they have been talking about this. But one thing that they haven't talked about is there is no consensus about how ambidextrity is developed and managed over time. So this is a good opportunity because many of the organizational ambidextrity are in processes, but not in technology that tend to be changing faster than other dimensions of an organization. So this is the research question that we began with, is how the contradictory tensions that are experienced when you are in the process of evolving a digital platform. So this is where I want to spend a little bit more time talking about my research approach. This is case study research, meaning going inside companies. So it is not about literature review, but it's about going inside the companies to understand how they suffer with this. So here, the objective of this type of research is that understanding is useful, right? It is going inside of people who are doing it, rather than theorize, to create a theory of how will I imagine this will happen, right? It's a social phenomenon, right? We are not looking to generalize in a statistical way, but it's through understanding. So it's not a logic of replication, but it's about creating a theory of the evolution of these platforms that later on other type of research can validate and generalize using more positivistic type of research. Right? So the methodological assumptions of this type of research is that we have to have a clear research question, and that we have sensible theoretical components, which is in this case organizational ambidexterity, but very open to what is that we find in the field, right? So it's going to be inductive to try to understand what are the dynamic capabilities that are being used in organizations as they deal with this issue of evolving their people. So we were inside a company, Remax, which is a very interesting company, right? It's the largest company in real estate, the number one real estate seller of houses, and they have 90,000 agents in 80 countries. So you can imagine the difficulty in trying to develop a digital platform that is global for all these agents to be able to do the work the way that they can. And some of the things about Remax is that they have a strong brand, again, the #1 seller of houses. They provide you with proven practices, top class support, and the idea for them is real estate professionals that are in business for themselves, but not by themselves, right? That's what the idea of Remax. And you can imagine that the digital infrastructure was very important, and here is all the things that how they have evolved that platform, right? It began by being basically a directory of agents. So you can imagine that, for example, if I were to sell my house in Denver, Colorado, because I'm moving to Florida, then Remax, one agent helped me to sell my house in Denver, but they can connect to the person in Florida because I'm going to be living a house in Florida, right? So it began as basically a simple platform to integrate people in different places, right? And they began to create different things. For example, a feature that was very important is the design center. So that was interesting because, for example, that's idea for agents that if I am in Colombia, I'm going to tell you how we do open houses in Colombia and what is very useful. And then somebody in Mexico can say, wow, this idea in Colombia sounds good, but we tweak it because in Guadalajara, Mexico, we do it in a different way. And it's a rich opportunity to have marketing that was more global, right? They also created Lead Street, which is leads. They have artificial intelligence identifying, for example, with a family of 5 children, what type of things they tend to look for, schools, sports centers, things that are going to be useful for that type of segment. So it helps the agent to do their job better by having a sophisticated analysis of data to provide you with a better understanding of the concept. And they also have Remax University. One of the things that is important for agents is to keep up with certifications. So they are in between visits. They can take different courses, and it have become a very rich set of training material. So this is a good example of a platform that, again, everything that we talk, right? It is stable, right, over time, but at the same time it's flexible, and it allows for people to keep adding things. And how I use it in Mexico is different than in Colombia, and it's an interesting one. So the research that we did, again, is going inside the company, is living with them to try to understand. So we were living with the company and basically spend time as almost like a worker of Remax for 16 months, looking at multiple sources of data. How is the ideas for the platform coming from different agents, how being filtered by the management team, by the technology department, annual reports of how the technology is being sponsored and funded over time, and interviews. So we interviewed 29 people, starting with the CEO and CFO, to different consulting people that were involved with this, with regional directors, to try to understand how we manage. Does that make sense? Any comments? Okay. And of course, this type of research is very different than the survey and research, right? Because survey research, you're just going to ask people what they believe. So you have to spend a lot of time thinking prior to sending the questionnaire about how you're going to structure the questionnaire, that is not too long, that they have a good language so people will understand exactly what it is that you're asking. And once you send the questionnaire, it's set. You just have the data and you have to analyze it. Here is different, right? Because as you begin to talk with people, to interview them, you learn. And you learn who else that I need to talk. And then you go and so it's a process of discovery in which you are collecting data, analyzing, learning, you have more questions, and it's a very interactive way of making sense of the set. Right? So the data analysis is a process of developing, trying to understand the nature of ambidexterity in Remax, developing a broad picture of the contradictions that they were finding and how they were dealing with that. And it was all the time matching theories that exist about ambidexterity, about magnetic intentions, with what we were finding out at Remax, right? So it's what is called a pattern matching to understand what's different from previous theories, what can we learn from this? And this is the coding that took place, but let me give you a little bit of the findings. So what we found is that there is different dynamic capabilities that are important at different points in time in the development of the infrastructure, of the platform. When they were about to begin the process, the tension is how to save resources, but also to be a distractor. So here what we found is that there was two key capabilities. One is the capability to identify, to recognize what is the purpose of the digital platform. How they began by focusing only on having that repository of agents so they can communicate among each other, right? That's the key element. But at the same time, there is a capability of exploitation that is called nourishing, which is ability to protect and begin not by trying to do everything at the same time, but focusing on let's begin by having only the repository of people. Don't worry about the university component, the lead component. You have to focus on what is going to happen. So I create trust in the digital platform to begin with. And so this is protecting the embryo of the infrastructure. And this one, top management had to be actively involved. This is not something that had to be developed by the technology people or the agents, had to be identified by the top, so it becomes an important platform. The second is once you initiate, the second phase is the same as when you're planting a seed, right? The first thing is putting the seed, but the next one is when you start putting water, nutrients, so to allow for this platform to grow. So here is coordinating the daily operations. So people begin to trust and put data in the platform, right? And allow innovation, and then you're going to begin to increase functionality. But you have to have enough to be this. So here, the two key capabilities expanding, but at the same time that you are legitimizing the platform. If you don't legitimize, people begin to, yes, I'm forced to use this technology, but I prefer to use my own system that I always use it, right? Many times that's what happened with SAP. You have seen how people, okay, you want me to do it, but I have my Excel document to keep doing the way I have always done it. So here is when you are still in the cultivation phase, this legitimation, the ability to affirm that this is the way that we're going, right? But at the same time, is you begin to increase functionality, right? So people can see, okay, so it is still limited, but I will use it. But I want to see what other capabilities are going to allow me, because if I am spending time and effort in learning that platform, I want them to be useful for the future with more functionality, right? And here then, yes, top management is important, but here is middle managers now become the focus, right? Because they are the ones who have to understand how to react to changes, to keep adding the new functionalities, driving improvements. So it becomes a organic platform that is going to be growing, right? And then the first phase is now we're in the phase of growth, right? And so you again now you have a plant that is already in a different way. Here you have to bring more stakeholders, better control of what is needed, but at the same time flexibility, right? Here is Airbnb now moving into other attractions, right? So it becomes a living infrastructure that is not mature, that it doesn't move. And here is the idea of augmenting, achieving better results, being flexible, but embedding it. And here is when we become part of the operations of the company, right? That everything, every announcement, everything goes through that. Does that make sense? Any comments, any questions? Very good, very good. So here again, that now you have the job of the top management is maintaining the oversight. Here they were involved. Here is the oversight, but they give autonomy to the different groups to keep going, because if it's the CEO, it will become too rigid. But now middle managers are not only reacting to changes, now is making sure that it's stable, but having always ways of soliciting new ideas about new features, new improvements that are going to be refreshing the digital infrastructure, right? And what is fascinating about this, again, you can see the difference between the typical implementation of SAP or this rigid software in which is always SAP forcing me for a new version. But here is the other way around. It's the organization in itself that based on the business strategy, where does it make sense to keep adding features and sides to the platform? Any comments, any questions, any reflections? Yeah, please.
I was just going to say that, it's interesting, whenever we're talking about the implementation of a system, we
Yes.
always talk about this comes from the initiative of top managers, but
Yes.
ultimately it has to be appropriated by employees at lower levels.
That's right.
they are autonomous and in the work, right?
Yes, yes.
But I was just thinking that like it never occurred to me that a company that is well established, like
Yes.
Remax
Yes.
here, can be considered like a digital platform. Like we always think about these companies as like, you know, being born like
Exactly.
5 years ago.
That's right.
And like their core is the technology, and around the technology they build their business. And
Exactly.
now I'm thinking a company that has their core around all their features can leverage technology and still be a digital platform, even though it's a traditional company.
Exactly. And that's the beautiful thing about here, right? Because we tend to think about, you know, I have to be an Airbnb, an entrepreneur, that I come from nowhere because I am a digital native to do this. This one shows, no, it's not. You know, the digital technology that we have now is one that has to be absorbed by the different managerial levels, so it becomes part of your strategy, of your business. And that's a more interesting thing than having the techies developing implementations. Yeah, very good, very good, yes.
Sometimes I feel that the platformization brings together a lot of different actors and different stakeholders. So is it not important that others should also be ambidextrous in their approach, not only my organization?
Yes, yes, very good, very good. So here what is interesting, and you know, there's a lot of details here. So for example, in this portion, Remax have two IT units. One that it was involved only in exploitation, and one that it was only in exploration. So the one that is in exploitation is trying to optimize in the typical IT department, right? The other unit is always training agents and learning from there. What else? What other data? What other functions can be useful to you?
So it is happening simultaneously.
It is happening simultaneously.
Is it possible that some companies might try to do it sequentially, something?
Very good, very good. Yeah, and you can imagine that yes, there's people who do it by sequence. This happened to be, which is interesting because you can see people who are really good with your right hand and do really bad with your left hand, right? It's a huge difference when you are able to manage both at the same time. And being sequential is a lot more difficult. It's a lot more difficult. Yes.
But it means that in fact this ambidexterity
Yes.
was organized
Yes.
previously to that process. You see what I mean? That what you are describing is the process of say, exploitation, what is the one?
Exploration and exploitation.
Mouse. Okay, exploration.
Yeah.
But in fact,
Yeah.
the ambidexterity, as far as I imagine, is the previous stage, because following the comment,
Yes.
the organization, the management already decided to create these two departments. One
Yes.
is in charge of the exploitation, this one is in charge of adaptation. Am I right?
That's
I'm just wondering
very
from
good, very good. Exactly.
the discussion perspective,
Exactly.
if this is really ambidexterity, or in fact it took place earlier, it was defined earlier.
Yeah, yeah. And I love your question because what happens is when you're doing this type of research, right, you have to go with the outliers, people who are doing very well, right? Because you're not going to spend a lot of time in a company that is mediocre, for example. You want to learn what makes huge difference. So in this case, you're right. I mean, this is a company that from the beginning, top management was very clear and actively involved into this had to be an ambidextrous exam. This is not going to be sequential, this is going to be at the same time. And then what we look in the process is that vision of being ambidextrous that at different point in time meant different things, right? To keep the balance between being exploring and exploring at the same time. But that's a precondition in the top management, right? If there's a company that is not with a vision, it's a different story. Okay? Very good. Does that make sense? So what are the implications of this type of research? So you can imagine that one is that, and again, this is a research that is timely because there is so much talk about digital platforms, and many companies today, they say, okay, the 50 most valuable companies in the world are platforms, and therefore I have to go to a platform. And here we're saying you have to pay attention not just to develop the platform, you have to understand how you're going to be evolving over time your platform. Be aware, right? Otherwise, if you don't have this mentality from the beginning, like Remax had it, it's very difficult, right? Second is that it responds to a call of organization on dexterity. So it's one of the first in-depth studies to actually understand not just the companies are ambidextrous, but what does it do, right? It's separating units at different points in time. What specific capabilities I have to pay attention at different parts of the process. And it's very useful in supporting practice as well, right? So for example, this case was, this research was published in 2 journals. It was in the Journal of the Association of Information Systems, which is for researchers, right? But it's also in Business Horizons, that is very much used in MBA programs and executive education, because it speaks to managers as they are dealing with implementation of. So I hope it was useful. I think that to bottom line with this is it's nice to talk about what are these platforms, why we have to pay attention to the evolution. But the other one that also is interesting is this different type of research method. Many times the research method that we always pay attention to is more the positivistic, survey, quantitative. This is qualitative, right? Is talking with a lot of people, spending 16 months inside a company, which is like, why am I going to do that when I can do a survey? But on the other hand, is very rich results, right? It's multiple publications that come across, not just one journal. Any comments, any questions? I know that it was 45 minutes, but I just want to make sure. And the people who are in Zoom, any comments, any questions?
I do have one, being the research presentation. It's about the methodology.
Yes.
I think of the
Yes.
case studies.
Yes.
I'm fond of it. This is my fond comment, I would say, in France. I love it. Okay?
Yes.
However, when I'm looking at the profile of the 28 people in the
Yeah.
they are all, I would say, insiders. Okay?
Insiders. Yes.
And I'm just wondering if there was not other bias there, because you have not worked with, let's say, the final users, the franchisees. Am I right?
Correct.
What you describe at the end, we suppose it works. Okay?
Yeah.
But maybe they have processed another stage.
Yeah.
But the result may be disastrous, and we do not have that because they are all people who are
Yes.
permanently working together. Okay, so at the end, of course, there should be some consistency regarding what they are doing. Haven't you perceived this as maybe a source of bias?
Exactly. So very interesting, right? Because again, it depends on what is the research question, right? Here the research question was really more in understanding how this company was thinking about the ambidexterity during the evolution. So you're absolutely right. Given the stage that they were studying, it was more with the people that were pushing the initiative. Yes, we talk with agents, but it's not very representative, right? Because this was some of the agents, but it was especially understanding how they were managing this. A different research would have been, which could be a follow-up of this, which is, okay, this had happened. What does it mean for agents in Colombia? What does it mean, and that would be a follow-up research that will be fantastic.
Because maybe the process, right?
Exactly.
The result is
Exactly right. So right now, it is basically in understanding how they manage, right? But the other one, but the next research could be in how it's being used, and therefore, it will be more in here, right? And here in my mind, that one will be more of a research method that is more quantitative, right? Because it's samples of people, but it will complement based on what we learn. What does it mean for the people? Yes, exactly. That's right. That would be beautiful follow-up, actually. Yeah.
I don't have a question, but just a thought that comes to my mind that actually it's very rich, and I would like to look at some more things such as how do the leaders will maintain common shared goal or sense of identity in the organization if there are two distinct groups, one working on exploitation and exploitation. Something like intergroup leadership or these kind of things can be looked at.
Exactly. Okay, so I'll give you a copy of the paper, because in the paper there is a lot of lessons like that, right? Which is very interesting, the type of money that went into, for example, the people who are doing the exploration, it was money to go to conference, to look at trends. The other ones were more in trying to understand how to exploit their cost savings and optimizations. Very deep.
Because the issue of the profile of the people,
Very
whether you are there or there,
Very different. Very different.
is very
Exactly. And what is nice is the opportunity of actually putting it together. Putting it together is a good management. It's ambidextrous management. Interesting, because now that you mentioned sequential, for example, IBM is a good example that they have done research in a sequential way. They have the creative people who are in IBM labs developing new technologies, and then you have the executives who are performing, right? But they are not together. They are not together. So that's one a good example of sequential.
I think that there are also several companies, for example, Microsoft,
Yes.
hiring consultancy companies to do the exploration or the expansion.
That's right.
And what about there? Because there's like people from the company working on that. There's like another separate group working on the other phase.
Exactly. So that's a good example. That's Microsoft, which is a little bit also like IBM, a little bit better. And for example, a good one that I like a lot is Google. So Google, for example, is that in your job, 70% of your salary is based on the project that hires you, and you are supposed to perform 70, but you have 30% to do explorations, right? And you are part of a research group. For example, that's how they develop Google Maps. Or, that's how they develop the Google car, which is people who have their project, but in the 30% they can choose to go and work for specific innovation. And some of those innovations have failed. For example, the Google Glasses were nowhere, but at the same time, it allowed people to be renewable because work after being executing all the time. In IBM, many times that will happen. People were burned and then they became entrepreneurs, right? Many former IBMers created their own companies because inside they couldn't do it, right? So SAP is a good example. It was formed by 5 former IBMers. Yeah, and several companies.
There's a comment. In the chat.
There's a question?
The chat.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Oh no, it was somebody saying live.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much.
My pleasure. I hope it was useful, and I hope the people who were on Zoom that were able to benefit from this. Thank you for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be at the Universidad de los Andes. Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Very clear.